So we're live. Let's see. No, no one's gonna even be here if I don't get maybe a link to spam on Twitter. Yeah, on Twitter, which I keep calling Twitter. Twitter. So yeah, this is my bad. I was just having to do. It's very basic, but very sensible notion of recording some video statements for an interview. And I've had remote jobs before, which involved live meetings, like Zoom meetings. Making things up from the top of my head was challenging. So this is my pushing the hell off my comfort zone by overloading the whole ascenic horizon thing, which has already meant a few things a few times. And so let's see what we have been posting lately. Just always this concept of the I-V distinction in the same horizon, which I've been more strict on than I've been recently, because there was this phase of semi horizon that was kind of structured as what I called a conspiracy, because there was this whole project that was general axiology, which is now going to be a dead end. Maybe if not a dead end, uh, well, something that's really ill-defined. Well, let's let's see if we can share from my from this tab. So here you are. This is asemic horizon. Up to this point, here's the bad news. Uh, this is the bad news, man. What it says, if you can't see, if you're just listening, it's the bad news was the two sentence post from April 29, and I will quote the general slash generic distinction. Therefore, the concept of genericity as distinct from generality doesn't work. Marche pas, no va, doesn't go. Repercussions soon to be noted. So, the very initial conceit of Asamic Horizon was to talk about politics, and to talk about Brazilian politics, which was going going kind of insane. But I quickly came to the idea that it was going all right because of things at a more abstract structural level. I know it sounds really pedantic when one puts it that way, and there's really a lot of pedantry that powers this project. But from that, went on to the idea of axiology first. Criticism philosophy, axiology first orientation. Axiology is a theory of value. There's a number of texts in which this is elaborated, what it means to analyze things from axiology first point of view. But the overall utopia, or the overall absolute limit this brought us, was general axiology. General axiology was the result of, after a cascade of abstraction layers, climbing levels of abstraction into more and more generic things. You had, at some point, you had something very magical and undefined, which was the switcheroo, where genericity flipped into generality. But it was at this point that we discovered the bad news that this doesn't work. So, what did you say about this then? So, here we start to have a series of fragments. So, this is what we had. We had lattice-like values. Lattice is a partial order structure. Values mean, means something is more valuable than something, whether aesthetically, ethically, we talk about a pickup artists and things like that, or cynical things. And axiology was supposed to explode. And so this very large thing where, given a sufficient level of abstraction, we all agree. We all agree on everything. Then this is an absolute limit. This is an absolute civilizational orgasm in which in general axiology are infinite. That was a catchphrase. But yeah, I started working, and I think we need to uh, let the preciousness in saying we, because we mean, of course, means you and I, let that apart, let that fall apart. I started working on a very tiny, a very tiny structure theory of this uh, lattice works. We could characterize them as like that graph-like structure in which what we call axiologies were lines, and we had the terminal structures and germinal structures around these lines. Lines are like graph edges to a first approximation. So anyway, this is the opening solve, and if anything has to be incident to a terminal and a germinal node, and uh, anyway, you're connected to terminal and terminal nodes in a graph, like graph theoretical, like semantics kind of interpretation. So things are reachable from germinal and terminal nodes in such a way that not only we replace the causal notion of teleology with a kind of structural, atemporal, or without clear temporal direction teleologies, but also genealogy. What we're doing here is to find that things exist if they have a temporal extent, they have timestamps attached to it, and then situate them into closer and more distant graph theoretical like structures that have this particular text, germinal, terminal. This is, I think this is just some lamenting on what we lost, and this is like a brain dump. Here we started discussing do how can you model centrality in terms of germinal and terminal-like structure. And here we make some explicit appeal to graphs as degree zero. So what's a single node? Is something that has a degree. A single node, a disconnected node. And secondly, if we have a universe of isolated nodes like that, you, there's a connection between how graph theory conceives of centrality and the connection of how we can build a structure from isolated nodes. So there's a more advanced version of this where if soldiers are marching through nodes in the most efficient manner, then the node that has been stomped up on the most is um, uh, has the between the centrality highest between centrality. Here we're just saying let's each node choose a peer, and if the peer the choice of peer is the highest connected node, then you get automatically a hub and spoke model. You have one node that has uh, a lot of degrees, but anyway, th- here the not interesting thing is that the third node decides who is the central node, who is the hub, right? So there's Romulus and Remus, and a third node decides to connect to Romulus or Remus. So here we start bringing some meat to this tag of germinal nodes. In the germinal model, we're thinking of lines, and in this model, all lines are germinal because it has all nodes are like little births of decentralized structures other than by the single germinal event. And any global model has to have a germinal event if it's defined by monocausality, if each thing has a single cause. This was, at any rate, substance ontology. I, I never developed this fully because it's rather simple. You can think of the shape of tissues as it's ambiguous between substance ontology and process ontology. In the substance ontology, uh, the shape of tissues is which has had all its flanks removed over the centuries is no longer the same shape because it has nothing of the same wood, not some substance. In process ontology, it is the same shape because it's connected through a series of events to the original shape. So supposedly Theseus sailed to kill the Minotaur. And so still we were thinking in a very substance-like way when we said that the lines from the Hobson's Fulks model were germinal. They had the germinal nature to them rather than being attached to a node that has a germinal tag. When we bring this to the process ontology kind of level, we have a single endpoint that's a terminal line. This terminal line connects to this connection model. Here's the second thing. I'm saying all the time germinal nodes and terminal nodes, and that's the graph theoretical way of approaching them. But in this kind of structure, terminal, everything's aligned. Everything's yeah, this is an edge first model, a line first model. So anything that we tag as a terminal node, as a terminal node, is a terminal line, a terminal line. And here we see that the terminal, the single hub, is a terminal line connected to a disconnection model. This connection model tells us what it means to, to disconnect. Anyway, if we now tackle terminal structures from a substance ontology kind of view, so all child nodes in this let me find a way to explain better than this paragraph. All child nodes are, I don't want to say parallel universes, but there's a single node that has many potentials. It can live anywhere. So the child nodes are no longer nodes, they're connecting lines. They're terminal lines that converge into a single pluripotential node. There's this idea of an egg, the egg from which the universe was spawned, or maybe the little mass before the Big Bang. And from a process ontology, from the point of view of how things are accreted rather than how they are, I hate my R right now. So if due to capacity constraints, you have this hub and spoke model and nothing new can connect to this hub, then a new node has to connect to one of these initial spokes of the hub spokes model. And with nothing else characterizing them, they're all equivalent. So they all correspond to what I call a germinal circle. And what the little hubs and spokes model becomes from this terminal point of view, from the point of view of how it expands, it's the hub disappears and the nodes itself are blurred because now we're on this interesting structural notion of a hubs and spoke structure, blur into a circle. And this is finally where we start to ditch the analogy with the graph theory. We'll come and go, come and go. So this all was an analysis of the hubs and spoke model, the hub and spokes. So what happens in a more general case when we want to think of what's a center? Because there the center was the center. So in graph theory, there's really no clear way of defining what's the central center of a general graph. There are many candidates, there are many formulas, and from a substance kind of viewpoint, I can tell you when to prefer what. When you arrive at the process kind of point of view, centrality concepts sometimes reflect ways of exploring the graph, ways to walk the graph. So there's an eigenvector centrality that's a result of infinite ends walking randomly. So between the centrality, I think I mentioned that corresponds to Roman soldiers that know the best way from A to B, going randomly, visiting random nodes. So this gives you also a little more of a flavor of substance versus process, right? A substance view, I can tell you what is what. A process view, we can see things as how they are accreted, even the concept of centrality, how it is accreted. So What do we do substantially from a germinal point of view? Here we start discussing what philosophy sometimes calls determination, and which we map. This is more than a pun, but I like to introduce things by, by a pun. It's a loss of termination, it's a loss of terminality, and there are thresholds at which things may lose their terminality. I can pull out my hairs in my mustache, and that my mustache has lost terminality. It's something determinate now, but I'm still alive. If I can further pull out my eyes, my ears, so and I'm less and less clear, and less and less a particular thing, a terminal, a singular terminal thing. So here's an example: wetness is roughly equivalent to the first drops of rain. Is how something has lost the feature of dryness. And yeah, multiple independent ways of determining a system can be matched into a spectrum of determining thresholds. This is a bit of a trick because we're introducing a process kind of view here, but we're not building things in terms of processes necessarily. We're just mapping ways of viewing the world to spectra of thresholds, either in explanatory superposition, just a pluralistic epistemology, or in or like a bunch of monocausal links. Already from process at the process view, here we see more clearly what I was saying before. The germinal reduction is a feature loss. Wetness is a loss of the feature of dryness. Dry things are definitely dry. Things that are not dry, they're, they can be drenched, they can just be not safe. But you don't want to get your boots dry or your peels dry. And the neatest way of looking at things at this is persistent homology, which is a way of sweeping mathematical spaces, vector spaces, at different ranges of scales, and this gives you certain topological features like closed loops and closed 3D loops, 3D like vaults, and so on. And these things appear and disappear as you increase the scale. Uh, but anyway, that's homological germinal reduction. Germinal reduction is a way in which as we elevate thresholds, like we elevate thresholds of what's needed to have two nodes connected, we start disconnecting nodes, and that's the first persistent homology, right? Two things are connected in my room if they are within a certain radius of them and radius of them, and as we increase this radius, more things and more things are connected, and vice versa. Structural connectedness is then associated with a sequence of thresholds. So on the terminal side, yeah, this is a sentence that I have to read 3 times each time to see if it makes any sense. But I am. So remember hubs and spokes, in which the central hub was a site of pluripotentiality because it could lead to many different things. And So how can we reduce a general structure to a kind of center, a terminal reduction, uh, in a terminal kind of sense, in which we can have this. But as I said, there's no clear substance story for this. From a more process kind of analysis, and remembering, we're looking at the time extent, things that have time extent, but not necessarily the time order of things. So there's blue centrality if you can roll the story either backwards or forwards until germinal circles appear. So if there's a complex graph-like structure, and if we can roll it emerge in some way, and if we can roll this way back and forward, we're thinking about collapse at the other end, so that only germinal circles appear. This would be triplet centrality, or if no remainder structures can be rolled back in circles. And again, this is given by a spectrum. So let's see what's next. So there was this germinal and terminal acceleration. This were maybe premature early applications. I mean, hey, I know this is unintelligible. I'm making first try. You have to do this the first time. So basically, germinal acceleration has to do with how you push things. Yeah, no. So there's this nonsense. This nonsense. I think it's not nonsense, but it's very. It's like balancing on a spider web. It's just the idea that an axiomatic is a determinated axiom. No, words yet. I'm contradicting myself. But rather than this derivatum is a predeterminated axiom. This derivatum has not undergone full germinal reduction, something that we want, but it's not something that we know that we need. And the germinating it is like drying it up. Yeah, I have to make diagrams for this. Maybe when my time's running out. Yeah, my time is running out. I didn't a lot of time for this. Also, who the hell needs to see this right? So, bye, no one.